Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel Lifestyle Critic, and welcome to my review and breakdown of the first episode of Marvel's What If. So with the conclusion of the Loki series a few weeks ago, opening up the multiverse at the end of episode 6, Marvel Studios now perfectly leads us into their next Disney Plus show, What If, which looks at the MCU and looks at what it would look like if one simple thing would have happened differently. Now Jeffrey Wright does a really good job narrating the series as the Watcher, who we have seen a few glimpses of before in the Guardians of the Galaxy post-credit scenes, where we also hilariously saw that Stan Lee was a Watcher as well. Now this episode takes us back to the past where Steve Rogers was supposed to be getting the super soldier serum, and looks at the events of what would happen if Peggy Carter instead took the super soldier serum instead, by her actually being in the room rather than in the booth, which really does show the merits of actually being in the room with important people and not being sidelined when big decisions are being made. Now with the animation style and general animated world of the MCU, it does take a little bit of time to get used to, but after about 10 minutes or so you're totally used to it, which is really great. And I also do feel like it does feel very similar to a point and click adventure game animation style, especially if you're a fan of the recent Telltale game series. For example, Back to the Future is also so much more detailed than DC and Invincible, the TV series as well, which really does feel pretty flat and unfinished at points. This time Marvel's animation series have made it really cinematic and truly like a movie style feel. Now as far as the storyline is concerned, some bits are a little bit similar to before. For example, the reveal of the Red Skull being the mastermind behind everything, the sequences on the train, and the action sequences against Hydra. As it is a 30-minute animated episode though, it does rely on the audience knowing what's happened before, as it does pace through everything relatively quickly, which actually I think works really well, as it just focuses on the new things and the different things this time around, as quite frankly it should be doing. I did think that they did overdo the whole overlooked female in the war effort narrative quite a bit in the first episode, but I did also really like the comparisons and parallels that they were making with Steve Rogers now being an overlooked skinny guy that wouldn't be deemed to be a true fighter, which really does show that the super soldier serum did really transform both of these characters, both mentally and physically, as well as changing people's external perspectives on them. So it really does put a lens on society and how people do actually judge a book by its cover. You can also tell that Hayley Atwell is absolutely loving this role and truly giving it her own. I'm sure that they said to her, if you do a really good job here, you'll get the opportunity to return as this juiced up character in live action. I also love how quickly and effortlessly she was able to use the shield like a true pro, and those scenes were looking absolutely brilliant in this animated episode. Now let's go back to Steve Rogers. I did actually think that Josh Keaton did a really good job actually in capturing the essence of Chris Evans' voice, especially as this skinny version of the character, so much so that I did actually think it was Chris Evans at certain points as well, which really does pose a really interesting question about whether or not you should pay out the big bucks for big talent to reprise these particular roles, when you can actually just pay a professional voice actor to do it, who you could argue could do a better job as they're really skilled in this particular art form. I also really loved how they made this character the first official Iron Man instead of Tony Stark, and how they made Howard Stark less of a heroic figure and more of a tinkerer-like character behind the scenes. It really does show how much the super soldier serum really did transform Steve's life, like I said before. I also really like how the Tesseract is powering up the Iron Man armor, which really shows that the Infinity Stones are still playing a big part in this series and the wider MCU world, and how his armor becomes less powerful later on in the episode when he doesn't have the Tesseract. As Steve Rogers lost the Tesseract to the Red Skull character, they were then showing that his Iron Man armor is powered up a different way, but like I said, it ultimately wasn't as powerful or as successful as before. Now let's look at Sebastian Stan. So I'm really glad that Bucky still has a place in this series, and I'm really glad that they made him still friends with the Steve Rogers character and didn't instantly insert him into Captain Carter's second in command instead. So I thought that this actually was really organic and authentic in terms of the Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes' friendship. They could have given him a little bit more to do, as I do feel like he was there for more of the sake of consistency rather than having his own narrative. But you know, they did have a lot to do in this episode, and actually I think they did do a really good job with it. What I did really like is that they twisted the train scene, so when you think that Bucky's going to fall down and then eventually become the Winter Soldier, he actually didn't do that, as Captain Carter saved him. And I really liked the foreshadowing line he had, which was, "You nearly ripped my arm off," which I thought was a hilarious foreshadowing of what could have happened in the future. I think it's also really great that Sebastian Stan returned to play the character, which I think is really great, and how they also flipped certain scenes. So for example, the bar scene, which was originally Steve and Bucky, is now Steve and Captain Carter. I also really like how youthful, innocent and truly full of life this version of Bucky is, compared to how dark and broody he is in the modern day storyline as the Winter Soldier character. I also thought that the references to the DC universe are really enjoyable as well. So for example, going back to the 60s Batman and Robin show, in terms of having a very similar aesthetic to the fight sequences, as well as Captain Carter having very similar weapons to Wonder Woman, with now having a shield and her sword, which instantly makes her different to the Steve Rogers character of Captain America, as well as making her very similar to the Excalibur, King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table-esque world of characters, which obviously is really reminiscent, as this character is actually British compared to being American. I also really like the pseudo post-credit scenes that they had with this character, now seeing the more present day version of Nick Fury and Hawkeye. So it really does mirror the first Captain America movie perfectly, in terms of Nick Fury telling Steve Rogers that it's been 70 years since they won the war effort, which obviously he did here to Captain Carter. I also think it mirrors the first Avengers movie, when the two characters were telling Loki to put down his spear, like they did with Captain Carter in this episode, in terms of putting down her sword. And also there was a really interesting flip, as this time Steve Rogers is the one that's being left behind. I do wonder if Captain Carter would ever go back to him after everything that she does in the present day storyline like Steve did, and if Bucky is also going to be part of Captain Carter's future world, especially now that he hasn't gone down the conventional path of becoming the Winter Soldier, or if instead he'll remain in the past and grow old with the Steve Rogers character. Overall, I really liked the first episode. I thought it was a really great introduction to this series and to a character that we've clearly not seen the last of. I mean, I am not the biggest fan of Captain America and the setting in the past, but you know, that being said, I do feel like they did a good job in terms of capturing the essence of the first chronological MCU movie really well. I'm also really looking forward to seeing what they'll be doing next. I'm sure they'll begin to connect all of these new what if universes together, and in the future, like I said before, I'm sure that they'll bring some of these new interpretations onto the big screen, most likely in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I do also love how Captain Carter is British, so really she should be called Captain Britain, and they even gave her the Union Jack on her outfit and shield. However, I guess they're saving that name and mantle for when Bryan Braddock will eventually join the MCU. Like I said, Hayley Atwell did a really good job in this episode and is totally giving it her all, although I don't think she's at Wanda Maximoff level yet in terms of being a truly brilliant female superhero. So that's my review and breakdown of the first episode of What If. I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of it? Please let me know in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye everyone.